So in the new defense ecosystem, we have next-generation firewalls, network and file segmentation, which we'll talk a bit about, also sandboxes and deception systems that are designed to capture ransomware and other types of malware before they get to the system itself. And the deception systems are used to actually deceive ransomware to believe that they're operating on a legitimate workstation or server when in fact they're operating in a sandbox, because some of the current malware systems are capable of detecting that they're operating in a sandbox, so they simply don't operate at all, or they'll spawn something that looks very legitimate until they go back to the legitimate system. Then they download the payload. Also, real-time analytics and zero-second intervention is possible with some of the enterprise-class systems. So if we're going to design for the new threats, what do? Well, we basically design for two things. What is the most likely thing to occur, or things, and what are the most serious in terms of potential damage to the organization? Now, I like this image right here. This is my favorite cat, and as you can see, he's just salivating because he is about to have the best meal of his life, and is completely unaware that he is about to become a meal himself. So vulnerabilities will always come back and get us. So the threat scenarios have changed within the last couple of years from something that we know that we should address to something that we absolutely must address. These new threat scenarios have become existential threats for all small and medium-sized organizations. And they're highly dangerous to enterprise-class organizations. Some SMB organizations are simply closing their doors in response to business-crushing security incidents. Also, sophisticated attackers are now using physical security attacks to spawn IT hacks, and we'll look at a few of those. And they're also using IT hacks to spawn dangerous physical security attacks. So in organizations, historically, we have two security organizations. We have IT security protecting the IT system, and we have the physical security department, which protects the access control to the facility and protects against physical security issues for the organization. These two organizations within, these two security organizations have historically not talked to each other at all. In fact, one could say in many organizations there's been animosity between them. Not quite sure why. Maybe it's a difference in expertise or whatever it is, a failure to communicate, but sophisticated attackers today are understanding that one of these systems can be used to attack the other, and they're starting to do this. So let's take a look at some physical security attacks that have been conducted using IT and OT security hacks. In November of 2015, the Ukrainian electrical distribution system was attacked by Russians, because why not? And the operator was about 15 minutes away from leaving the end of his shift, just before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, dead of winter outside. And he's looking at a screen, and all of a sudden a mouse cursor starts moving by itself across the screen, drifts over to an icon for a substation, and clicks that substation offline. He's horrified. So he reaches down for his mouse, and he's going to run up and click it back on the line again. Sorry, mouse doesn't work. He starts quickly trying to take control of the workstation. Keyboard doesn't work. He has no control whatsoever of his workstation. And as he sits there horrified, and as other people gather around him, 19 substations are tripped off one by one by a cursor that's moving entirely by itself. Before it was all over, 320 households and businesses were completely without power for a period of more than a week. Hundreds of people died from this attack. In 2013, the Iranian Republican Guard, a division of the Republican Guard, attacked a dam in upstate New York. And they released water simply to show that they could do that. Nobody was killed, nobody was injured, but it certainly illustrated that our infrastructure is highly vulnerable. And last year at the DEF CON conference, there were demonstrations of how common access control systems can be taken over remotely, and how common video systems can be taken over and used. And the demonstrations included how to go in, seize control of the access control, alarm and access control systems, turn off alarms, unlock doors and open doors remotely so that an intruder could go through the alarms, go through the access control doors, and then how you could use the video system to loop dry video, with no intrusion shown, right on top of the actual intrusion so that the evidence of the intrusion was completely erased in the system. So that's what's being taught at DEF CON, and this was on several of the major access control systems, several of the major video systems. So let's take a look now at IT security hacks that were carried out through physical security attacks. Everybody likes extra bacon, certainly the NSA. And recently on the dark web, the extra bacon attack was exploited and put up for sale. An individual who was, as I understand, a contractor with NSA had worked with the Exponent Group in NSA, which is their premier hacking organization, and gained access to desks overnight. One of the individuals was not following the clean desk policy. Materials were out on the desk. These had the primary exploits dating back to 2013 for the Cisco ASA firewall, the Cisco Pix firewall, and others that have yet to be released that we don't know about, but we know that there are others. All these have been made available on the dark web for sale. Cisco, as we speak, is dramatically trying to close the holes that NSA had opened and that the extra bacon attack showed. This was a classic physical security hack in that an insider was placed in the organization, gained a certain level of trust, routine background checks were not being conducted, and so the attack was able to be put forward. In 2008, the Veterans Administration had a massive data breach, over 500,000 records lost. This again was a physical security, not an attack, but negligence. The VA was not encrypting this information. A VA employee took unencrypted information, put it on his laptop to take home and work on it. Had to run into a 7-Eleven or a convenience store for just a few minutes. I'll just be a few minutes. Left his laptop sitting on the passenger seat. And of course it was broken into, the laptop was taken. So again, a physical security breach. And just recently, about 3.5 weeks ago, a jewelry store in London was attacked using 25,513 Internet of Things security video devices. These devices were applied to the web server, the email server, and other servers for the, I guess it was all on one server for the video, or for the jewelry store. And that's a massive amount of data. But if you think that's a massive amount of data, BVM which is a major internet service provider in France, had an attack recently with 145,607 Internet of Things security devices, 1.5 terabits per second aimed at their servers. Took them offline for several days. They were finally able to get back up online again. That is a huge attack. So let's talk for just a few minutes about this and where this can go, because this is the future of IT threats. 4 years ago, I started talking about ransomware. Everybody said, ransomware, how bad could that be? So, today over 50% of the attacks, malware attacks, are ransomware, and they have devastating results for organizations. Many, many small businesses completely out of business as a result of it. So imagine, instead of 145,000 devices, and that was from 105 countries, by the way, altogether for this huge DDoS bot. Imagine that we put together 10 times that number with devices that are clearly out there and available. These are all devices that have default usernames, default passwords, individual video cameras connected to the internet, and digital video recorders connected to the internet. And there's two interesting things about the way that this attack is carried out. One is that they use Protocol 47, which is the GRE protocol. And GRE is basically an unencrypted version of a virtual private network. So it has all the same attributes of a VPN, except there's no encryption. And virtually all firewalls come with GRE turned on as a default. So this will allow an attacker to go right through a firewalled system. But even if we weren't using GRE, those devices can transmit in one of two modes. They can transmit in unicast, so one-to-one, or they can transmit in multicast, one-to-many. And in a typical multicast system, each of you would subscribe to the multicast transmission that the transmitter, am going to put out. And I would get that subscription, and I would put it on my subscription list. And then when we're ready to do that, I start broadcasting, multicasting out to everybody who's subscribed. But the dirty little secret about multicast protocol is that you don't have to subscribe. All I have to have is a subscription list. And so I can have a subscription list created out of any range of IP addresses. It can be all of the IP addresses of Google or Amazon. It can be all of the IP addresses of Southern California. It could be all of the IP addresses of the United States of America. Think about that for just a moment. Thousands and thousands, let's say 500,000, a million Internet of Things video devices transmitting in multicast mode to every IP address in the United States of America. The potential damage for that is that essentially everything that's connected to the internet in the USA would be taken down, because nothing can stand up against that much data coming in to the ports. Nothing. Not the US military, not Google, not Amazon, not anything. And so anything that's connected, such as, say, nuclear power plants, any type of power plant, natural gas distribution, food delivery companies, fuel delivery companies, water distribution plants, sewage treatment plants, all the cell phones in America, essentially everything can be taken down in a microsecond. And because you can't communicate how to mitigate that attack, and there are mitigation measures available. So A friend of mine at the War College told me off the record that when he runs these numbers, that we're talking about 90 to 95% mortality within a 2-week period on an unmitigated attack. That's worse than nuclear war. Got your attention? So here's a puppy snuggling a teddy bear. Pretty scary stuff. So if we want to look at how do we improve security and deal with threats like these, and you can deal with them, at least at an individual organizational level, and there are measures by which the internet can also potentially deal with them. The best way to resolve IT security within organizations is to use an IT security compliance-based security plan. And there are 2 reasons for this. The first is we have to do that. Whether it's HIPAA or Sarbanes-Oxley or PCI DSS, whatever compliance standard it is that we have to deal with, we have to deal with it. And so it's much easier to get budget for a security, an IT security program that's based upon compliance than it is for any other type of program. So now we push the budget out of the way. So let's look at what are some of the compliance issues and why it's so important. Well, HIPAA can take you right to jail. Just recently, a physician in Southern California was imprisoned for repeatedly accessing the healthcare records of celebrities and politicians, for which he had no business and no need. HIPAA has very, very large fines, $100,000 per month per site, up to that, based upon the type of breach and the methods that were in use by the organization before the breach. PCI DSS is a compliance requirement that is contractual based instead of federal or state or local government based. Since 2006, $3.3 million in fines. More than 80% of those have been against small businesses. And enterprise breaches such as Target, if we take a look at the Target breach, $162 million in immediate direct cost to Target, an additional $67 million in subsequent costs to mitigate, and they lost 40% in holiday sales in that holiday season. And the sales losses have continued to mount because many, many Target customers have never gone back. So when you lose your business reputation, you lose an important piece. So where are the threats coming from? Well, the newest version of ransomware is a service. So for the delightful entry price of exactly $0.00, you can set up a ransomware operation if you get on the dark net and go to do it. That's a dramatic reduction in price from $39 just a few weeks ago. So in this case, you subscribe, you set up your account and where you want the money to go to, and then the ransomware, you decide what model you want to use to send ransomware out. And as the money is paid to the RAAS service company, then they keep 80% and you get 20%, so any 12-year-old kid can do this now. Massive DDoS attacks are coming from state-sponsored, political economic threat actors, and revenge attackers. Advanced persistent threat actors from state-sponsored, from political enemies, such as the attacks recently on the Clinton Foundation and on the Democratic National Committee, activists and revenge attackers, compliance breaches, all of the above, plus huge penalties and consequential cost directly to the organization. So that's the threat landscape. So we don't want to be caught by unexpected intruders. We want to improve IT security now. So how do we go about doing that? Well, the proactive defenses for ransomware include email URL protection, including previously screened emails, because if we put it in a sandbox, really intelligent ransomware will recognize that it's in a sandbox. It'll run for a while with no negative payload, and then the system authorizes it, says, well, it looks like a good URL to me. It goes back on the real system, it recognizes it's on the real system, and then it spawns a referral from the good URL to a bad URL, and a ransomware payload is downloaded. USB chips, hey, parking lot's a good place. Insiders, so we need to train insiders to be careful about email URLs. Contractors, again, training. And it's important to do incremental backups with ransomware out there on the landscape. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Advanced persistent threats and distributed denial of service attacks. What are useful tools there? Next generation firewalls. Data segmentation. So we move data into various containers, each of them segmented from the others. Access rights management, so we also containerize our users so that you know, the average middle manager doesn't have access to everything in the system. And we also want to protect anything outside the skin of the building. And now as security systems are being connected to these systems, we need to firewall every single device that's actually outside the skin of the building. And everything outside the skin should also be encrypted out there as well, so that we can't just plug and play. I used to do risk analysis surveys over in the Middle East. I worked out of Beirut, Lebanon for about 20 years and covered the Central and North Africa, all the Middle East, the Gulf, South Asia, and Southeast Asia from that location. And one of the things that I saw in one of these surveys, I was walking into a parking garage for a government institution, central bank in this case, and I'm noticing that there's a cabinet over on the wall next to a parking space, just, you know, short little sidewalk next to it, and that cabinet door is just a little bit ajar. So I'm curious. I go over, kind of open up the cabinet door. What's inside here? Oh, well, you know, we have a 48-port switch in here. And what's connected to that? Well, all the video cameras for the parking garage and all the access control devices. And so we inquire just a little bit more. How was this? You know, well, the lock broke. We haven't fixed it yet. Don't we have an alarm on this? Yeah, there's a tamper switch, but it's not connected. And, well, we've got open ports on this switch. Please tell me all those ports are blocked. No. And is the switch itself at least firewalled so that, you know, we can't just plug something into the switch and gain access? Well, not really. And so at least the access control and the video system are firewalled from the business system, right? No, kind of, we're all on one VLAN. And so this is the kind of thing that you run into. And we run into this not just overseas, we run into it here in the USA. People who are just negligent in their network designs. So anything outside the skin of the building, firewall, encryption, just make sure of that. Also separate the security video system and the OT system, the HVAC and other systems, VLAN, all of those. So we want to focus again on system CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and accessibility throughout the whole system. So those were proactive steps. Now let's look at some reactive defense strategies. So we want to, if we have a breach occur, we want to contain the threat. Number one, we want to eliminate the threat. We want to contain the damage. We want to audit the damage, especially compromised data. Take a snapshot of everything. And we also want to gather evidence, restore any lost or compromised data. We need to report the data loss to appropriate compliance agencies and customers. And we want to review the incident and improve defenses. So those are the basic reactive defense strategies for that. So in terms of ransomware protection, on prevention, we want to take those email URLs and scan all the emails that are coming in and all the URLs for them. The rolling URLs, which go to a sandbox and look good, we want to make sure that we operate those in not just a sandbox, but a deception system if we're an enterprise organization, so that the ransomware can't detect that it's in a sandbox. Email phishing. There are systems out today that can look for the language of emails that are phishing emails, and it can isolate those. And honeypots or detection systems. Other mitigation systems for ransomware. There's an immediate mitigation. Several products in the marketplace today have immediate mitigation. They'll either completely isolate it so that ransomware cannot launch at all. It's 0-second mitigation. There are several products that have like 5 or 10 files that it allows to encrypt before it says, hey, wait a minute, this looks like a pattern that shouldn't be happening. There are a couple of systems that use artificial intelligence to take a look at where is this encryption command coming from? Is it coming from a keyboard on the system, or is it coming from a URL outside the system? Well, probably we don't want to encrypt the entire network off of a URL call. So it simply doesn't allow that to run, and it sends it for advisor. And post-incident mitigation as well. If we do have a ransomware attack, we have to re-image those computers and servers, including the operating systems, the programs that are on those, and the drivers, and the configurations of those. We have to restore backup files from previous backups. We have to restore system configurations. We have to make version updates to make sure that the image is up to date today. And hours can be lost per workstation, and that's if the images and the backups work. So it's best to prevent it as opposed to mitigating it. In terms of ransomware protected backups, typically we go directly from storage straight to backup, and that's done in a mirrored fashion. The best approach to use for ransomware backup is to put the storage into a temporary holding area that can be a part of the long-term storage, that is a container itself, that operates maybe on a 15-second or 30-second delay. And we take a look at the quality of the data that's coming in, and before we push it to the long-term backup, we do a check for each of those files for integrity. So is it the same file going out that it was coming in, or is it being encrypted in the temporary holding area? And so that can be done simply by scripting and programming a portion of the storage to act in that fashion. Oh, and one last thing. It's important to have lunch once a month with the physical security director. Both organizations, remember, have the same mission, which is to protect the organization, to secure the organization. And the only way to eliminate these cross-discipline issues is to have a culture of cooperation and kindness between the two organizations. And that's best done by getting belly to belly over lunch on a regular basis. So information exchange, a friendship develops, you become two guys on a common mission, and that's the way to solve that problem. I'll open up for questions and answers.